everybody, and welcome to the Board of Education meeting Wednesday, December 13th, 2023, beginning here at 6 p.m. at Frederick School. This is the last regular board meeting of 2023, so Happy New Year early to everybody. Next time we meet will be in 2024. Need a call to order and roll call, please.
Mack.
Here.
Braden. Here. Nash. Absent. Albert.
Here.
LaCroix. Absent. Miller.
Here.
And Weedman.
Here. Okay, we've got quorum. Please join me for the... Oh, we need to call... Yes, you have to call the student. Yes, that's right. That's right.
Sure. Morgan. Here. Supashri. Here. And Annalise. Here. Great.
Welcome to our 3 new board members this evening as well. We're glad to have you here. Please join me for the pledge. Okay, thank you. I need a motion to approve this evening's agenda, please.
I'll move.
Second.
Okay.
Miller.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Albert.
Aye.
Weedman.
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.
Okay. Do we have any public comments signed up for this evening? No. Okay. That moves on to a presentation this evening by our 3 new board members this evening, from the Grays Lake Middle School student representatives. We're glad to have you here.
We actually have other students. These students are going to be speaking later, right? But we have Mr. Smith along with a number of students coming forward to share information. And board, I just have to tell you, I've had the pleasure of working with this student group a couple of times now, and many conversations with Mr. Smith about this work. And I've known Mr. Smith for 5 years now. I don't know if I've ever seen him quite this excited about something. He is so excited about the work that he's doing and some of his team members are doing with this group. It's really, really nice to see. So please take it away, Mr. Smith and students.
Yeah, I get excited about a lot of things, but I am pretty excited about this student leadership group for sure. So again, thank you very much for allowing us to come in tonight and celebrate the work that we have done with our new, and you'll hear a little bit more about this, our new student leadership team at GMS. And as Dr. Glickman knows, our saga about the naming of this, we do have and finally have a name for us as well, and that is the Council of Panther Representatives. We have gone through many processes to get to that point, and we're all settled on that at this point. So I'm going to get out of the way, and here is our presentation of our new group.
Hi. My name is Jaden, and I'm one of the representatives here at GMS. As you know, GMS is all about representation and spirit and so many more great attributes that we have here at our school. The Council of Panther Representatives is a group of students and educators who value leadership, productivity, and teamwork. We try to make every voice, big or small, heard. Our goal is to better GMS for the future and to leave a legacy for the upcoming students that are going to be attending GMS or for any students who may be watching this presentation or meeting.
Hello, good evening. My name's Maya, and I just want to talk about how we were chosen for this group. The Council of Panther Representatives were selected by volunteering through a Google form that was sent to all of 8th grade, and the questions in the form asked us to define leadership in our own way and why we would like to be a part of this group in the first place, as well as how we could work to improve our school and community.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm a member of the Council of Panther Representatives, and I'm here to talk to you about what we have done so far in our group. We're a fairly new group here at GMS, but we've already have 5 whole group meetings and plenty of small group meetings discussing what we want to accomplish in our school and for the future of our school. All of our members are very excited and eager to find more ways to make our school better and to make sure that everyone feels welcome and invited into our building.
One of the tasks that we started with was just asking the question, what do you want to work on? How can we make GMS better? And I think when I asked that question, we ended up with about 57 things that came back. Things that were big, things that were small, and everywhere in between. So we spent some time working together to narrow those down, and that's what we're going to talk about. I think we have 7 or 8 things that we're really going to focus on for the remainder of the school year.
The first thing that we want to share with you is how we plan to improve our science resource. We plan to work with all of our JMS science teachers to learn more about our new TWIG resource that we've been using so far for our curriculum this year. After finding out more about our new resource, we can give feedback and generate ideas about for the future on how we can look to better implement and connect our lessons with our students to make sure everyone gets the best out of our education. The team members who will be working on this topic include Chloe, Annalise, Gabby, Jordan, Subi, and Naomi.
So, as you know, at GMS we have Win Time, and that this can be used as a study hall or for any extra activities that we need to help accomplish at GMS. We will work with Mrs. Blackburn, Mrs. Miller, Mr. Gross, and Mr. Smith to better understand more about our Win Time activities and just what we have been doing at GMS. After investigating more about our Win period, we will give feedback and ideas on how we can better differentiate our activities at GMS and make them more flexible for students everywhere around the school and outside of the school, and just make it a safer, more accessible time for all students. Team members working on this topic include me, Jaden, Isabella, Ibrahim, and Sudhana.
I'm here to talk about fitness days and what activities we can do to work on them. We're going to work with our GMS PE teachers to further understand more about the purpose of our current fitness days. After learning more about our fitness day plans, we will give feedback on ideas on how we may be able to add more opportunities for all GMS students during this time, like how students usually, when we walk into the locker room and they find out it's a fitness day, they usually don't want to, I can't find the right words.
Do it.
Yeah, basically. And for now, the only team member working on this topic is me, Maya.
Hi, I'm Manazvi, and today I'm going to talk to you about how we can improve the school's designs and logos for our team uniforms. We're going to work with Mrs. Tangler and Mrs. Van Lake, our GMS athlete directors, and Mr. Smith to better understand the requirements and the budget restrictions on this topic. After learning more about these expectations, we're going to give our feedback on how we can add more specific designs and make our uniforms more comfortable and appealing to the eye. The team members working on this topic are Addie, myself, Elena, and Cameron.
The next thing that we want to talk to you about is our GMS multipurpose room and how we plan to make it more inviting for everyone. We plan to work with Mr. Wiechek, our art teacher, and Mr. Smith to understand more about our parameters and any limits or restrictions we have in order to add more murals to the walls of our GMS cafeteria. After learning more about these expectations, we will give feedback and ideas on how we may be able to add more school spirit to the walls of the GMS cafeteria. Some ideas we have are obviously our paintings, murals, decor, anything really to bring more school spirit and make it a more cozy place to be. The team members working on this topic are Morgan, Maggie, and myself.
The last issue I'm going to bring to your attention is the cell phones during the school day and the ridding of hate speech in our school. We're going to work with both the deans, Mr. Gross and Mr. Smith, to understand what we're already doing with these two topics at GMS. After learning about these expectations, we're going to give our feedback on how we may be able to add more ideas and to help all students follow these expectations. The team members working on this topic is our entire team.
And the last area is one that I asked the team if there would be anybody interested in working with our Frederick School GMS PTO. Our PTO is, the combined PTO is in its second year, and it's doing a fantastic job of keeping activities going at both of our buildings and continuing to up the participation within our learning community, and adding some students to that meeting that we have once a month during the school day, while the kids are already at school with us, is going to be a great opportunity to invest in their ideas and what they think would be a lot of fun and add to our buildings. So Jordan, Suhani, and Subi are going to be part of that process with us and going to those meetings and being part of that with us. And then we just wanted to give you the names of all of our representatives because it's important that all of them are noted tonight. This is an important leadership opportunity, as I started with. I am giving them a lot of information. I'm giving them a lot of freedom to do their work outside and do that individually and in small groups. And time again so far, they have just continued to come back at us when we're together in a meeting, and just the outcome is just fun to be part of so far. So we have some pretty lofty goals with some important work for our building, and so far, I don't believe that there's any reason why we won't achieve all of those.
We just wanted to say thank you to our D46 School Board of Education, Dr. Glickman, Mrs. Gluck, and the D46 learning community for allowing us this time to introduce ourselves and giving us the opportunity to speak about what makes GMS such a wonderful place to be. We look forward to seeing you again in March. Good evening.
Board members, I'm sure you have some questions and comments. Before you do that, I want to point one more piece of information out for you. So we have 3 people at the board table. We have 4 people over here. We have one student, yep, at the in the audience, and a number of other students who weren't able to come this evening. The students who are not in front of you here were still a part of making this presentation. So, right, Mr. Smith, you had some students who were doing the writing. Do you want to talk about that for a sec?
Yeah, so it was a 4-step process where we had the kids sign up for 4 different aspects of the kind of the big thinking, the brainstormers. Then we have students who were the writers of the work. I just sat and watched this happen. We had the kids who actually put the presentation together. Obviously, we gave them a format but one student worked with Mr. Gross to get the GMS Panthers in the background, which I think was a pretty cool touch. And then obviously we have our presenters. So all 20 of our committee members were part of this presentation tonight, even though not all of them are here.
Okay, I'll open it up to board members for comments and questions. Go ahead, Ms. Miller.
So thank you so much for signing up to do this. I know it's extra time and you're probably stretched in a few different directions already, but it's so exciting to hear your voices and to see the action plan that you have in place. I do have a question for you. It's kind of a complex question. So, and it deals with the hate speech focus that you talked about. And so I'm just gonna ask it. I don't expect that you have a question, that you have an answer right tonight, but I still have the question that I'm holding. As I said, it's kind of a complex question. So I want to start by just saying I am so glad that you're taking this issue head on. And hate speech is always wrong. It is never okay. And my question in no way is meant to minimize that. So just that up front. But I'm going to ask you a question that is complex. So I'm going to ask it first, and I'm going to give you an image to kind of help you understand why I'm asking, and then I'll repeat the question. And again, I'm not expecting an answer tonight, but just want you to consider it as you're doing your work. So here's my question. Can you tell us about a time when someone who normally engages in hate speech surprises you and says something kind or generous. So again, I don't need you to answer right now. Here's the image that I want to give you. If you imagine a horizontal line like this, and it's a thick horizontal line, the stuff below the line is bad, the stuff above the line is really good. And hate speech, I think we would agree, is in the bad sections below the line. So if we get rid of hate speech, that's great, but that just brings us to the line. So the reason that I'm asking you the question is, I want to know what happens, what are the things that are going on before and after someone who surprises you, who sometimes says hateful things, says something kind or generous, because that will help me understand what we want more of. So I told you I was going to ask the question, give you an image, and then give you another, repeat the question. So I'm repeating the question right now, and that is, can any of you tell us about a time when someone surprised you, someone who normally isn't afraid to engage in hate speech, says something kind or generous or good, something above the line? Can you tell us a story about or a time when that has happened? Oh, score. Thank you.
So, yes, we do know that hate speech is never acceptable, and I do agree with you completely. There's been quite a few instances where we have had hate speech, and sometimes those people have shown kindness out of complete nowhere. And that makes us wonder, where does this come from, and how did they get the idea to say something kind or nice after all of this time saying hurtful things? So I think it comes from a place of generosity. And maybe they still have that thought in the back of their mind. So you don't really know their clear intentions, and it can be hard to understand like the reasoning of why they are saying these kind things after so long of saying like hurtful things, right? So maybe it's like a mindset change, or maybe somebody implemented this new mindset into them and gave them a new idea and perspective on things. So it can really be a hard thing to deal with at our school, and we are working so hard to try to minimize or stop all of this hurtful language at GMS.
Thank you. Man, that was not an easy question and a very articulate response. I appreciate that, Jayden. Did I hear you correctly? There was a new idea that's maybe what you're thinking might generate kindness and generosity? Okay, thank you.
I'd like to add to my colleagues' comments and thank you all for the work that you're doing and starting and the just incredible list before us. It's really, really important. And you've stepped up at a time when we need voices. We need young voices because we know you are going to be the leaders of the future. It's as simple as that. And so seeing that list is heartwarming and is an incredible testimony to the work and to the ideas that you all share together. I thank you for that, and I look forward to hearing to the updates. You're bringing essential voices to the table that need to be there, and that may either have historically not been there or have not been there recently, but you're bringing new voices to the table, and that's really, really critical to the work of the school district and your building. And I don't have a question, but I do have, similar to Mrs. Miller, just something to reflect on as you do your work. And I cannot take credit for this question. This is a question that my colleague, Mrs. Braden, has asked frequently, and it always sticks with me. When you're at the table, make sure you ask who's not at the table and why they are not there. And let that be a guide to your work. It's a really, really important question, and you have it embedded in all of those ideas that you presented tonight, and I'm really, really proud of you. Thank you for sharing that tonight.
Thank you.
Dr. Max stole my question. No.
I gave you credit.
No. I actually have a request of all of you, which is this. Make us uncomfortable. Ask the hard questions. And my commitment is that I'll listen and I'll sit with that discomfort. It's so important that we hear your voices. Sometimes it can be really hard. I mean, really hard as a young person to come in a room full of adults and say, this is what we think, and this is what, this is how we're feeling. So I invite you to do that. My commitment is to listen to it, and your voices are so important. And the other thing that I want to say is that I hope through this experience you are inspired to lead in the future, including one day serving on a school board. I would love to vote for one of you one day for D46 board. So thank you for joining us in this community.
First off, how often do you guys meet?
So far, we've been meeting weekly.
Okay.
And to put all of this together for tonight, I think we met daily for about a week and a half to make sure that we were ready. The goal is to probably meet twice a month as we go. But as I said, there's going to be a lot of outside of meeting time because we only have a half hour at a time. So to do the things that they're asking us to do and the discussions that we need to get through, we're never going to get through that in a half an hour. So there's going to be some time outside where they are going to have to do some non-directed by any adult type of work. And I do firmly believe that they're ready for that.
Okay, so that kind of comes to the second part of this, and it's kind of a question more for our board too, is you said you're going to see us in March. You're looking at, 3 months away, 3.5 months away, depending on which part of the meeting you come to. Is it possible that maybe monthly we just get some sort of written update about the progress that you've made? Doesn't have to be on a full-on presentation, but just something that gets emailed out to the board as an update, so that we know what progress you guys are making, and it keeps it fresh in our head instead of all of a sudden March comes and you're laying out everything.
Yeah. We have found some pretty fantastic writers in this group as well, and I bet you they'll be all over making sure that that comes to you for sure.
Yeah, that would be great. If it can come from them to you, to me,
Yep.
to the board.
Yep.
Sure.
And thank you for stepping up.
I'll just reiterate, thank you. It is hard to get up and speak in front of a room full of adults and to take that step and answer that Google form and say, I want to be a leader and lead my youthful community, and you're tackling some big issues, and it was telling to hear that the entire team wants to work on the cell phone issue and the hate speech, ridding the school of hate speech. So I commend you for doing that. Thank you.
And just so you know, the entire 8th grade ended up getting that Google Doc, or that Google form, and 49 students initially responded. When the first meeting came, 25 came, and now we're down to 20. So throughout those 5 meetings, it has been a push on time and work, and are you really wanting to do this? And the 20 that we are working with right now have stayed the course over the last 4 meetings and over the last week and a half of getting things ready for today, and I think they're ready for it. So yeah, we should be very proud of these 20 students for sure.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you very much, Council of Panther Representatives. All right, that brings us to the next portion of our agenda, which are board reports. I don't remember where I started last time, so I'm going to start tonight. I don't think I've ever started in the middle. I did a couple things. We had the CEDAL Governing Board meeting last week, and I know, as you saw in Dr. Glickman's update, Dr. Val Donnan has submitted for her retirement from the CEDAL School District, effective July 1st, I think, or end of June. Yep. So I believe the search committee and everything is going to start on that. We also had a really good presentation from the different department leaders on the program review going on and in the process of starting and going on at CEDAL. And so I'm looking forward to getting that updated information when we convene again in the next quarterly meeting. And I know the executive board will continue to update the governing board. There was a governing board member that had mentioned a little bit more open communication to the governing board. The governing board only meets 4 times a year, once quarterly, while the executive board, I think you meet tomorrow. Once a month or twice a month or once a month, so a little bit more frequently. And so we're kind of hoping to share a little bit more between those 2 boards. The governing board is large, takes a little bit more time to go around, and then the executive board is more like the structure that we have here. So looking forward to that as well, and seeing what the outcome of the search is. And I also I've had an opportunity to work with Dr. Donnan for these past years that she's been in service as a superintendent, and I want to thank her for everything she has done for the exceptional kids at CEDAL and those programs. It's wonderful. Are we sharing our III stuff too as well? Okay, yeah, I'm going to give kind of a high overview of what I saw, just kind of share out the most impactful thing to me, because I had and I got this idea from another one of my colleagues, Mrs. Miller, going into these meetings each year with a targeted focus on the workshops that I wanted to go to. And for the benefit of the public here, there's a annual conference that board members attend to learn and share and work on the things involving school districts and board members. And the workshops are usually numerous, too numerous to attend in the 3 days that we're down there. So I went down this year with my focus being towards policy monitoring, and I know we've been talking a lot about policy lately. And so the workshops that I targeted to go to at that time were the ones involving policy. And as many of you know, the board governs through its policy in the district. And so learning how policy works, learning how to monitor what the board does through its policy, and learning how to understand if our policies are getting the results or getting the information that we need to know is really an important part of what boards do. And so for me, and I went to 4 different workshops on policy and then some of the open sessions as well, but I think my whole takeaway from, and I'm going to put, my slides are almost done, and I'm going to share that with everybody as well. But what I took away from the whole thing, the main theme that I took away from my workshops was we're always in a state of continuous process improvement. We're always talking and always moving and always sharing ideas, like the council just shared with us before, and like our 3 board members this evening are going to share with us tonight when we get to those reports. Constantly thinking about what we're doing, constantly reflecting, constantly questioning, and constantly trying to figure out if whatever we have is the right information. So what I did with my slides is put that theme as the principal theme to share with each of you, and then a series of bullet points to kind of hone in on what I took away. So I didn't want to go through each and every workshop today, because I'm going to kind of conglomerate it into something a little bit bigger. But for me, it was just refreshing and actually a reminder of why we do the things we do through policy and the important questions that we need to continue to address. So I'm kind of refreshed about that idea, and that's my board report. I'll go this way this time. Or to Chris, yeah, it's fine. Ms. Elton.
I did create, oh, there we go. So I've been to a lot of learning events lately, and I wanted to update on the foundation. But December and the end of November, I've learned a lot and been busy. The quick update from the foundation is that they have gone through some grant applications this latest round, and they have made their decisions, and they will be notifying the awardees this week, so that's exciting. Second, I recently attended a webinar titled Becoming a Green Ribbon District, Fostering Environmental Sustainability, Education, and Stewardship in Your District. And it was only an hour. I'm going to send the link to the recording because I found it really worthwhile. They talked about a lot of things that we do, and reducing energy costs annually. Every dollar saved is a dollar that can be reallocated to our classrooms in support of students' learning. That's their driving force. Part of their strategic plan is to innovate to more efficiently operate within the district. They talked about understanding your district's energy bill down to specific charges, and I know we've done a lot of things over the last couple of years, and this particular group, they claim to be proudly the greenest district in the state and possibly the nation, they said. And I challenge us to show them, hey, we've been doing some cool things too. So, and maybe we join forces and figure out how to, one of the things they said is they know they're providing an experience for their students that they haven't quite figured out how to measure yet, but they know it's good. Like when the students come in on their buses and see the pollinator gardens growing under the solar panels, they know that's good, the composting and so on and so forth, and so many other things. The fact that our student group is going to be looking at the science, the Twig science materials with the teachers, that's that piece of the education piece that I think we can really shine. And maybe we figure out how to measure that impact, like what is that positive impact of these different things that we're doing. Since there seemed to be a lot of energy and a lot of other people attending that webinar. Okay, next was the Lake Division Legislative Breakfast, and I did send that email a couple days ago and explained that the questions that I brought didn't really get addressed, but I think we can reach out to our state rep and state senator, and they will probably gladly talk to us about those things. The things that were talked about at that meeting, they talked about the Illinois Comprehensive Literacy Plan coming out, talked about I think something that they all would like to see, or maybe it's in the works, is a mandate review panel where, with all these unfunded mandates, what's really necessary? Let's get back to basics and get rid of some and hone in on what we need to hone in on. The one legislator talked about what do teachers need, what do school districts need? He talks about, he gets some of his best legislation ideas from people in the field. So are we taking advantage of our opportunities to communicate with the legislators and say, this is what we need? There was a little bit of discussion about improving the teacher pipeline and alternative pathways to teaching. Nothing much different from what we've heard before, but there's more we can address with that. And then they did talk about the EBF formula working well, but it does need tweaks and modifications. So, and then moving on to the next slide, I'll get into my triple I report. So, yeah, thank you. You can see that we did, so I want to thank, first of all, Mrs. Nash for leading our group discussion, our board discussion, and then also preparing me really well to be the alternate delegate. And it was, I'm not sure how many of you have experienced that. It's really incredible. There were 400 delegates there. And it was the first time I've seen a debate just stop because someone said, called a question, or I forget what the term is, but I was like, oh. And then just, okay, it just ended, that debate. So as we had voted and discussed it, this is how it turned out. All the recommendations by the resolutions committee happened the way we expected it, or the way they had recommended. The one question, the industrial construction one, the timely appeal was filed, but it didn't reach a 2/3 majority to hear the appeal, so there was no discussion then. But what was interesting is we did get a chance to hear from the district who had brought that proposal, and it was a story of a small elementary district at odds with a larger high school district, and the high school district had negotiated with a billion-dollar company, and if I am reading my notes correctly, there's now going to be a trucking distribution center right by a playground in 80 acres that's right next to the elementary school. So it's kind of like it's kind of what we suspected in a way, unfortunately. So, so I guess that just shows that we need to maintain our good trusting relationships with our local districts and make sure something like that doesn't happen closer to home. So. I'll move on to my next slide. So the workshop was called 5 Strategies to Connect, but these aren't the 5 strategies. These were my key takeaways. Their board does school spotlights, much like we are doing in a way, like what's working well at a school. We're having the students come in. They did a book study together, great on their behalf, about how to be an effective board. There was talk of a lot of community-driven input, especially students, and I'm so excited about our student involvement that's growing in our board. And then another key piece of their workshop or presentation was about how they, with that community-driven input, they had a few meetings several meetings with their high school district too, creating a portrait of a learner together that first year. And then from that, they developed their strategic plan. And then the third year, they picked 2 sets of metrics to measure, are we doing what we need to do for that strategic plan? So just wanted to, one interesting thing, they had 150 stakeholders at one of those Portrait of a Learner meetings, and just want to highlight the invaluable insights. They said they were invaluable insights from 8th graders and high schoolers who were present. So again, very glad that we have students here. And then, let's see, my last slide is more things from the III. Because of the particular workshop I attended, it had the state superintendent and then 2, a state rep and state senator who are chairs of the education committees. It just reminded me again, with that breakfast a couple weekends ago with our local legislators, to meet and communicate more with our legislators and make sure, because I think our state rep and state senator are on some of these same committees, and we have power in our advocacy. So are there certain topics we want to advocate more for? Before the last keynote speaker, she was great, but I actually enjoyed learning about 2 other people before her, and that was the IASA Superintendent of the Year. And she was honored for many things, but one of the things that stuck out for me was the competency-based learning. And I was thinking about how sometimes our students yearn for differentiated, more challenging instruction, and maybe that's something we can look into. For that particular example, there was a student who wanted to do culinary arts but had missed the very first part of the semester, and this was a high school example, and he was able to record himself doing things and learning things over the weekend, and that was showing his learning that he'd already done and how he could catch up. That's probably not, I'm sure there are better explanations of competency-based learning, but that's the example I have. And then the last thing is, or the last person that I appreciated learning about was Chris Lowe. He received the Thomas Lee Burroughs Award, and he had he's done a lot of equity and inclusion work in his district, and he had some advice and said it's not easy, it's hard, and needs to be proactive. It needs to be data-driven with clear goals, trackable metrics, and a timetable. Ask the people you're trying to help, are the changes improving their lives? And then what are you sacrificing? Admit fallibility. And I just thought that was important to keep in mind. So thank you. I took a long time. Sorry about my long board report again.
Mr. Weidman?
For me, tomorrow I have the Economic Incentive Committee meeting again with the village and the other taxing bodies. So I'll be there tomorrow night. Hopefully we'll have some documents for the board and administration to look over from there. As far as my III report goes, I went to a wide variety of sessions. Usually I'm more focused like Dr. Mack is, but this time I just kind of bounced around to what kind of caught my eye at each one. The first one was on school safety. Surprise, fireman here. It was the Community Consolidated School District 21 was kind of had a series of events over the fall of 21 that precipitated them looking at nonviolent events in the district and some violent events in their district, and how to have a focused response to each incident basically being the same. So the procedures were the same for every incident, you know, whether it was a lockdown or a soft lockdown or whatever wording they used for it. Focused on the need to open dialogue with our local police. They ended up actually bringing back resource officers, which is something that As far as I know, we have never had resource officers in our district, dedicated resource officers. We have a good relationship with the police where they'll come in, they can come into our schools and kind of interact with our students. But we don't have anything that dedicates a CSO or a resource officer like the high schools do. I was glad to see that said it was, they want to look for funding for that. So that is the big thing, is the being able to finance that. Because they had eliminated them due to budget cuts already, so they were working on bringing them back. They sent their staff to a training so that everybody was on the same page. The book and the training program they used was called School Safety and Violent Event Incident Management. I do have all the slides from these presentations that I can share out with everybody. I was able to download them. Talked about the development response for all schools. So what happens in Frederick School would happen in Prairie View, which would happen in Park, so that if teachers are bounced around or subs are bounced around, they all have the same idea of what's going to happen. They use the program Crisis Go. I know the high school has used that in the past as my kids go there. We don't use Crisis Go here, but that was another resource that would be available for us as we look forward. And then they dedicate 2 weeks a year for safety programs. So they have 2 safety weeks during the school year. And they also talked about their reunification plan, which is something I know we've already been working on. The second one was from business to board, which I sat with a few people that I knew that were already board CSBOs. I think our last 3 CSBOs were in there. So sat with them. It was nice to catch up with some of them. I don't think one recognized me. Yeah, Chris actually recognized. He talked to me. So they talked about onboarding of new school board members. You know, I think that's something that we recognized early on when I got here is, you know, not everybody is versed in the tax process and the tax levy process and the budgeting process and what information that the CSBO can provide to any new school board members. I know we worked with you when you came on, and Christy when she came on, and Tamika when she came on, to try and get you up to speed as to where we're at financially and budget-wise, so that, you know, there's a lot of things that come across here, and if you look at it, it can be look kind of like a foreign language to you some days. So, so they talked about their onboarding that needs to happen. They talked about boundaries for the board members themselves. Obviously, we've talked about the balcony level view and keeping the 3,000 foot level or 30,000 foot level, and not get down into the weeds. And obviously staying student focused. I talked about what information we want to come from our CSBO and what information the CSBO is supposed to be sharing with the superintendent. And then I talked about the financing committee and what it would be used for. You know, talking about employee benefits, talking about long-term outlooks, upcoming large contracts, and stuff like that, to where we can have a more in-depth focus, which is what we kind of already do as well. They did mention that, you know, we have board members that sit on that committee, that they're the ones that have the discussion or the voting power. But the ones that any other members of the board that show up for those meetings are kind of like observers, right? They can ask questions like any other public comment, which we allow, but they were trying to make sure that, you know, they understood that everybody had a boundary there and who is kind of not necessarily running it, but having those deeper discussions. And then they said they meet that most of them should meet about 2 or 3 times a year unless there's something more pressing need going on. Then the other one I sat in was how to build an employee-centered district. I sat with Dr. Gluckman with that one. It went into issues with recruitment and retention, morale issues with employees, stating that a lot of, you know, since the pandemic, most places still haven't recovered from the morale issues that came with the pandemic and the issues that brought up, right? work from home, the computers, the depression, and everything else like that, there's still a large mental health issue that has come from the pandemic. And I think we recognize that, and it's able to try and still break through that issue. They did use a company to do their surveys, and they sent surveys to the district-wide employees, and then they turned that information out and tried to work on little things that could help with morale. Employee-centered programs that, through our health care insurance that help them, break out of some of those funks, were part of those deals. And then the last one I went to was, we always seem to be in collective bargaining, so it was trends in collective bargaining. The big thing that I took out of that one was making sure that we don't negotiate in between contracts. The contract is what the contract is. You kind of have to live with it for the 2 or 3 years that you have it, and try not to get into the habit of MOUs and, side letters and stuff like that unless you absolutely have to, because then you're always perpetually negotiating and never get a break from it. And then the trust issues, right? Growing that trust with the unions so that we have a better relationship, so hopefully the negotiations go a little bit quicker and you have an open dialogue with them, which I know we've been working on. I think that's always an improvement for us. So those were my takeaways from the ones that I went to.
Great. Before I jump in Triple I was so excited that there were so many cast and crew members here from the musical, but I think they all left. But if anyone at the table was part of the production of Oklahoma, yes, awesome. I saw it twice, and I was so impressed and just wanted to congratulate everyone involved. So impressive that we have a live pit band. I think we're the only middle school in the whole area that has a live pit band for our performances. Everyone on stage was incredible, and just really enjoyed it. So thank you so much. It was really a blast to watch. And for all the staff, I know Mr. Smith is always there moving chairs. Everybody who stayed late to make sure that happened from the teacher and staff perspective as well. It was really phenomenal. My Triple I, you saw me looking at my phone because there was a new app that I loved this year that had a place to take notes in the app. So that's why I was scrolling a little bit to make sure I was in the right place. My focus was mainly on legislative issues and advocacy issues, with a little side trip with a couple of our district leaders into referendum land. But I'll give you the highlights first from that, from just the couple sessions I attended that were focused on legislation. So one of the things I think we can advocate for, evidence-based funding, which is how we fund our schools at the state level, and it makes sure that the schools who need the most money get more money compared to schools that have more like revenue coming in from maybe large businesses. So if you think of like Gurnee, Six Flags is paying some great property taxes for Gurnee schools. Grays Lake doesn't have a Six Flags, so we struggle with revenue more than some of the other districts around us that have more businesses. And so the Deputy Governor for Education was at one of the sessions I attended, Martin Torres. He was great. He was very proud of continuing to fund evidence-based funding at $350 million per year. I think what is missing there is inflation, and that $350 million does not buy what $350 million bought 2 years ago, and we were getting $350 million. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to advocate for it. That is great. We appreciate it. And you please don't use that as a point of pride. It's actually less money every year because of inflation. And so I think we have an opportunity to maybe advocate for making sure that we're keeping up with CPI and the way that we fund schools, so that we're actually getting like the real value of money versus having less and less purchasing power when our contracts are going up. The other thing that was interesting is that fiscal 25 from a state perspective, the years of a lot of revenue coming in are coming to an end. It's going to be a tighter budget for the next couple of years. We must have a revenue conversation was one of the quotes. I personally was glad to hear that because I think that is what we, that is what helps our structural deficit that Mr. Wildman is always telling us about. And so there's just a lot financially that I think is still needs to be decided at the state level for us to continue to progress with our adequacy and get the funding that we need to keep being effective at the rate we have been. The other thing that was interesting was about they talked about Illinois really moving in the right direction in terms of our teacher pipeline. There were 3,500 vacancies at the beginning of the year in the state, but the interesting thing about that was 80% of those vacancies were in 20% of districts. So there's a real disparity, and I know Dr. Wolk probably has seen those as well. There's a real disparity there, and so they're working on flexibility, as I think Mrs. Albert talked about, in terms of incentives, signing bonuses, relocation, upskilling paras. How do we help? Attract and retain our amazing teachers? They're working on provisional licenses, reciprocity with certification with other states, et cetera. But I think it's an area that it sounds like the state is doing a lot, and I'm hoping we're able to benefit from a lot of it. And then the last thing that it came up in the legislative discussion, and it's also just come up in our equity committee discussions as well, which is how do we make sure that we have the funding that we need to support newcomers to our district, to support migrants and refugees. And so, of course, there are other areas of the state that are having a lot more influx of newcomers and students who need to be in school. They need to, have, and then, their entire families need support as they get settled in our area. A lot of times they don't realize that they're coming to a cold climate. They don't know that they're coming here. They just get off a bus and there they are, and they don't have things for the winter. And so at a legislative level, I think we can also be advocates for bringing that conversation. It really didn't really get anywhere in the last session in terms of funding for schools that are accommodating lots of newcomers. I know we do a great job here, and we are not in the situation now that many districts are, where it's very dire. But I think advocating for funding to make sure that all districts are able to have school as a place where newcomers can feel safe and feel welcome is really important. So that was the legislative kind of the themes. And then I also went to the approving referendum challenging times with a couple other district leaders, and it was Beyond Your Base, which is the partner that we've been working with as we looked at our referendum. And I'll tell you what I took out of there very simply is that we are being data-driven. We're really looking to hear the voice of our voters and really understand what we can bring to our voters that will be acceptable to them, and that they can get behind and vote for. And I felt really good when he talked about best practices in how to go about this process. That's what we're doing. So that, I think, is my report.
Mrs. Miller?
Thank you. So first of all, I missed the last meeting, so kind of a delayed congratulations to Mr. Wildman and the whole business office for the 2 awards that we got for both the budget and the audit. The merits, if you have not heard this, our district won, as a result of their work, the Meritorious Budget Award and the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting, which is an award for our auditing process. So thank you and congratulations. I attended a couple things in the last month that I wanted to share with you. One was the virtual policy forum, and this was health and learning with heat-resistant schools. One of the panelists was from UCLA, and she talked about the Inflation Reduction Act and its strategic focus. If you're not familiar with this, is evolving, and it has two kind of new foci or tactical strategies, which are supporting solar and energy storage. So I was glad to hear that because I think we're ahead of the game on that. So that was great. But energy storage, they're saying, is really essential because it is getting hotter. It's going to continue getting hotter, and we need to make sure that we are prepared for those days to make sure we have cooling centers for our students. In that, there's a policy brief that California has put together. It'll be in your inbox tomorrow if you're interested in taking a look at it. But it proposes the idea of an extreme heat emergency plan and related policies. And I thought that might be helpful because we're going to be talking about policies in February. So wanted to give you a heads up about that and just some more information about from that policy brief. Another thing, I'm wrapping up another class in my graduate program, and there's a tool that I think that might be helpful, especially, Jim, as you go into the economic development committee meeting. It's called the Toxic Release Inventory. It's a really sweet interactive map, so you can hover above your own community. So if, for instance, you hover above Gurnee, you'll see that there are several major polluters in Gurnee, and those have an adverse impact on student health, they have an adverse impact on residential health, and you can actually look at the amount of chemical, the type of chemical, and the impact on human health. So it's a really nice interactive tool. And when you compare, if I hover over Grays Lake shows that we've invested pretty heavily in open spaces and do not have as many of those big circles in our area. So again, I feel like that's maybe something we could use to recruit and retain teachers and staff, as well as new property owners, that we have invested in these green spaces that provide free environmental services like air filtration and water filtration. So great stuff in that tool. I attended the village zoning meeting a couple nights ago with 127 board member Liz Wixer, and we got an update on the Highland Park project, which is adding connectivity for water resiliency and making sure that all the residents, some of whom are our students, in Highland Park have access to water because there is an insufficient supply when they think about what's coming with climate change. So they are working, the county has funded this, over $2 million have been allocated for that project.
You talking Highland Lake?
Highland Lake, thank you,
Highland Lake.
yes. What did I say, Highland Park? Sorry, Highland Lake, yes. Yeah, why are you bringing this up? Thank you. Highland Lake. Used to saying that. And that's, let's see. And that was interesting because one of the things I noticed about Fremont during our administrator's presentation is that they are at 99% funding without a big business base. So it kind of makes me wonder, why is that and what's going on there with their business base that allows them to fund their schools so well. As far as III notes, I had a focus that I wanted to kind of do a Venn diagram between newcomers, policy, and unconscious bias. So I started with newcomers and asked this question: how might we engage our newcomers so that they are set up for belonging and so that they have a part to play here? In that workshop, they talked about some key characteristics, funding mechanisms, staffing points to consider, and monitoring criteria. So I just want to highlight a few of these. One of the characteristics that surprised me or that made me stop and think was that in terms of priorities, it's safety, belonging, and connection. Those are the priorities that our newcomers are needing, and started to think about how could we amplify that. In terms of funding, there was some legislative action with, bless you, McKinney-Vento. Christy, did that come up in yours at all? Not specifically?
I thought it was Crespo was who tried to carry that legislation last session, but it may be different this year.
Okay.
Or this session.
Apparently it's coming up again in January. And so that's a way that we can fund some of our work with newcomers. It also made me pause and think about the CEC's work because the federal priorities are housing, healthcare, and education. Forgive me on the details on this, but apparently a municipality somewhere in the Chicagoland area was the recipient without any prior notice of several buses of newcomers. They had no time to plan. They had to literally on the spot welcome them and find housing and healthcare and education. So thought we might want to start thinking about that as we are working through CEC priorities. In terms of staffing, really need to promote and amplify the idea that this is a shared responsibility for everyone in our community. It's not just our multilingual staff. So, and then monitoring criteria. In particular, looking at the questions that can guide monitoring, which is what results are we hoping for and what evidence do we need to assess these programs. So I'm hearing a theme coming up in a lot of our reports is that we're wanting to maybe have some be intentional about what evidence we're asking for and making sure we're making decisions based on that and not burning our staff out by asking for a whole bunch of stuff. So that was newcomers. The next circle in my Venn diagram was unconscious bias. And if you remember, we had our keynote speaker talked about bias, and then I also went to the half-day session on unconscious bias and did a deep dive into that, got a nice definition. It's so hard to get all of that information into one slide. So generally what I heard in overlap between the keynote and the half-day was that, I thought he said it well, that Bill De La Cruz said it well, to create outcomes of opportunity, access, and inclusion through a focus on processes and behaviors that generate awareness of, in particular, and I guess as a first step, that just to start really paying attention to when judgments come up, knowing they will for each of us, regardless of our race, our ethnicity, our gender, or religion, and that's normal and okay, and we just need to disrupt those by being, first recognizing them, and then being intentional about our behavior afterward. So I appreciated that. In the half-day session, it got a little more tactical, and I liked the information about the bias traps. I liked the breakdown of those. Some of them were familiar to me, some of them it was just good to have reminders about. So just wondering how we can make that a part of our process very intentionally. And then I liked the call to courage. One of the things she said was that courage is both careful and bold, that we need both. And she identified 4 types of courage, but I liked the courage to identify because it causes us to slow down. And I don't know how we do that when there are so many tasks pulling at our schedules, but to pause and question, to seek to understand, to check our assumptions. I thought maybe we could work in some processes to do that are more tangible and familiar to us, and then to learn. So to me, that was all an extension of what we heard from Amanda Ripley last year. So I loved that those keynotes are building on one another. And then 2 books. Thank you to all of you, because we did buy a book that all of us have, which is the organization point, the blue one on the left. And in the half-day session, while we don't have this, it wasn't purchased for us, it's available to us. It's the Leader's Guide to Unconscious Bias, and I found that to be just a good suggestion. It is on the nightstand by my bed with a whole bunch of other books, so working through them. So the next theme that I was looking for, the third circle in my Venn diagram was policy. This was a review for me. I went to this last year also, but it was good to revisit. And what I appreciated is, I caught this time that I missed last time, is policy 610 identifies some communication parameters that might be good to revisit. I loved the focus on evidence as a tool, and we can capture that. IASB has a summary sheet that we can use for every thing we want to monitor, so that we know these are the reports that are coming, here's when they're coming, and then here are the questions that we're using to monitor progress. And that allows us to communicate it back to our neighbors and friends. I also kind of went back to the idea of a monitoring calendar, which is the image on the right. And I missed this last year, but those calendars monitor for different things. One of them monitors for compliance, one monitors for in-depth assessment, one of them monitors for flexibility. So I thought as we approach February in our board workshop, we might want to think about what's within reality for us in terms of our time, and then also in terms of staff and in terms of what our goals are for policy. So that was the third circle in my Venn diagram. But I took it one step further because, as you know, I am working on this graduate program and spent a little time in my hotel room working on that final project, which was taking a deep dive into policy 4.70, which is our resource conservation policy. So that project, tried to take one of our policies and trace the red thread from our school board policy up through state and local legislation to federal legislation, and then look at how it's reflected in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. That red thread is that waste management is a strategy to protect human health. It ensures access to clean air, water, soil, and decision-making, which are basic resources over time, to all of our citizens. And it, for me, solidified the importance of focusing on 4.70, which we're looking to establish baseline information by the fall. But it also focuses on something throughout the whole, all the way up to the federal legislation, which is paper and organics. And if you look at the image on the right, that is municipal solid waste composition for Illinois. And if we took control of our paper and organics, we could reduce, make a significant dent in what goes into landfills, because that stuff poisons all of us. So that was my deep dive into resource conservation policy, which leads me to next steps. And I'm trying to catch up here. So potential next steps that we might consider taking, one, to establish a monitoring plan that is familiar and kind of captured in one document for all of us, that articulates where we have moved beyond compliance. I don't think any of us at this table is okay with just mediocre. I think we all strive for that, and we're doing it, so it'd be great to articulate some of that for our community. I think also it would reduce bias, and it is responsive to both qualitative and quantitative data. So I think it would be great to have a coherent space for us to look at that. We could read the book, this one, together, and have a little conversation perhaps with our students too. It's not a ton of reading and it's big font, so we could probably read it quickly and get some good stuff from there. And develop from CEC specific goals, develop some partnerships with other organizations. We've been focusing on food and food pantries. Maybe we want to talk to our committee about focusing on healthcare and housing. So that is my report from III, and thank you to those of you who send us to that. We take it very seriously. We go to everything. Really appreciate that you support our learning in that way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Miller. That moves us to the next portion of our agenda for this evening, which are the student representative reports. So I'm going to invite our 3 student representatives this evening to share. I'll start on the far end with Morgan.
All right. Good evening. My name is Morgan, as Mr. Mack just said, and I have an update from GMS Fine Arts Department. Last week, our school celebrated the talents of many of our GMS students through their performance of Oklahoma. We had many students who worked hard behind the scenes playing the music for the show and on stage who had lots of fun and showed off their amazing talents. Next week, our GMS choir and band performing groups will present their second concert of the year. Our choir concert is on Monday, December 18th, and our band concert is Thursday, December 21st. Again, we are looking forward to coming together to share in these amazing concerts.
Good evening. My name is Subi, and I have an update from our GMS Sports and Activities Department. Our GMS basketball season is winding down tonight with our 8th grade boys and 8th grade girls teams playing for 3rd place and our 7th grade boys team looking to win the championship game. And the news just came in, the 7th grade boys won the tournament.
Yay!
Our GMS 7th grade boys basketball team won their conference tournament tonight. It took 2 overtimes to get there, but they are conference champs.
Nice, nice.
Our 7th grade girls team also had a great season, but did not qualify for the semifinal games this season. Our GMS cheerleaders and dancers also had great seasons performing at all of our home games. Our wrestling season started on November 30th, and our boys and girls volleyball team tryouts will start when we return from winter break.
Sorry, it's on. There we go. Good evening, everybody. My name is Annalise, and I have some general GMS updates tonight. All GMS 8th graders will visit the Holocaust Museum in Skokie this week as a culminating event of our state mandate study on genocide. We have our amazingly fun second quarter assembly next Friday, December 22nd. Our second session of our intramural program starts after we return for winter break. We will be running many interviews and clubs, such as Wall Mural Club, Cooking Club, Debate Club, Pride Club, Bottle Cap Mural Club, Lego Club, Improv Club, and Chess and Board Game Club, to name just a few. The high school registration is coming in January. The Grace Lake North Welcome Night is January 11th, and their registration day at GMS is January 25th. Grace Lake Central's orientation night is January 12th, and their registration day are January 22nd and 23rd. And finally, winter break starts December 21st. We are all excited about that.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Morgan, Subi, and Annalise, for the student representative reports of the Board of Education. It's an honor to have you here tonight at the table. And that moves us to the superintendent's report. Dr. Glickman.
Yes. Well, first of all, I wanted to mention that earlier Mr. Weidman was talking about the Crisis Go app. And although we aren't connected with the Crisis Go app, at our last board meeting, we talked a little bit about, we had a safety report, and we talked about the Stop It app that we are indeed going to be bringing into our school district. It's relatively similar to Crisis Go, and in fact, just today, our cabinet and a few members of our support staff did a first round of training with that app. So just wanted to make sure everyone knew that we are bringing that in. I too was going to mention some performances, so thank you ladies for doing that. Along with those wonderful GMS performances, we also have wonderful performances going on at Frederick School this week and next week. It's just a really wonderful time in the school district with lots going on. I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Lorenzo to talk about the Cops and Tots event that she talked about last time, and now we have kind of follow-up for that.
Thank you, Dr. Glickman. Admittedly, I didn't know much about it, so I'm pleased to share that it was an awesome event. Last Thursday, our Early Childhood Center welcomed several state lawmakers and several Illinois law enforcement officials that are local to our area. And we participated in a Fight Crime, Invest in Kids, Cops and Tots event. Got it up. Mrs. Donahue did a fantastic job setting up a really nice environment for us to be able to welcome those representatives, the two directors for that organization and our guests, so we could come in and meet each other. And then we walked into some classrooms and we had several of the guests read to our students. Even Mr. Fry gave a really funny book to two, and it was quite a sight to watch them flub through it. It was great. And then afterwards, there was a nice tour of our program and then some nice open dialogue for everyone to engage in. So Dr. Glickman, Mrs. Donahue, and myself were wonderful recipients of being invited to have dialogue around data and statistics, connecting early childhood education and lifelong learner success, and that correlation to a decrease in crime and having productive citizens. And then further discussing the investment of the entire room in the expansion of access for all children to have access to preschool education. It was wonderful, so thank you to ECC and Dr. Glickman for supporting that.
Thank you, Dr. Lorenzo. Board, you've heard us talk over the years and definitely over the past year about the educator pipeline and how we are really invested in growing that educator pipeline. And I'm proud to tell you that over the past couple of weeks, maybe 2 weeks ago, we did some work on that. And actually, Mr. Smith is in the room, and he was instrumental in bringing this in. I believe you made the contact with CLC. We had CLC students come to GMS a couple of weeks ago. These are students who are education students and interested in becoming teachers. And so they had a day with, right here in GMS, well, right over there at GMS. A number of our administrators spoke with those students, and then they had the opportunity to observe in classrooms. I had the chance to go and speak with a bunch of those students and encourage them to finish out those studies and then come back and see us. And then if I understand correctly, Mr. Smith, they're coming back twice more this year, we hope? So that's great. And they were really very positive about their experiences with us, so that was exciting. I'm going to hand this over to Ms. Sluck to talk about also a GMS and a conference.
Yeah. So on Monday and Tuesday of this week, there was the Raising Student Achievement Conference, which was held in Oak Brook. And that conference is run through the Illinois Association of Regional Superintendents of Schools. And you can submit proposals to present there, and then there are over 200 breakout sessions. There's keynotes on both days. I attended last year. It's an amazing conference. I'm excited to share that, and she just left, but Nikki Blackburn, who was one of our instructional, is our instructional coach at GMS, and Aaron Gross had their proposal accepted, and they presented yesterday. Mr. Smith, I know, was there and sent us a great video of it. They did a fantastic job. It was a full room, is what I understand. Standing room only, lots of conversation, lots of questions, and they presented about our What I Need, focused specifically on math intervention at GMS. So super excited to share that, and would wish I was there to see it too, but I know I heard great things about it. I know Dr. Diaz also presented at the conference, and so I'm going to turn it over to her.
Sorry. Yes, I also had the opportunity to give two presentations. One was basically the art of ML programming, and the second one was on newcomers, and so that's a very big topic. I also heard very good things about that conference, and that people who, we were up at opposing times, but on the second one, they had said a lot of really nice things. So our name was very well represented.
And I just want to comment that it's exciting to me that last year was our first year of attending this conference, and this year we were presenting at it, and that shows really amazing leadership. So thank you to everybody who's involved in that. And then finally, this week we had an Equity and Inclusion Committee meeting. The focus of that meeting was on refugees coming into the nation, coming into the state, coming into Lake County. And so we talked about that a lot. And in fact, I know that the board has asked for a presentation in the future on this topic, and Dr. Diaz will be doing that for us in February. And as I round out the superintendent's report, I have to compliment and thank the three students that we've had sitting at the board. This has been a long board meeting already. We are not nearly done with it yet. Usually, by the time we get to the superintendent's report, it's a little bit earlier on in the evening, but this evening, because our board had so much to report about the conference that they went to, it's been pretty long already. I have to compliment both of you and Annalise as well. Your ability to be attentive while people are talking is unbelievable. Really, really good. We hope you'll stay a little bit longer, but we will understand if you can't. The next part of, there's a number of topics coming up that I don't think will be as lengthy, and I think there might be some that you had wanted to weigh in on, and we'd love you to do that. But if this isn't going to work for you and you have to go, we understand. So I just wanted to mention that. All right, let's keep going.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Glickman. That brings us to our consent agenda. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda this evening, which includes the personnel addendum that was sent to us earlier today.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Braden. Braden.
Aye.
Albert.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
And Weedman. Oh, sorry, he left.
Yeah, step away, yes. Okay. We do not have any action items on this evening's agenda, so our next portion is the unfinished business portion of the referendum update.
Sure. All right. Well, board, by now you've all received the newsletter that came out today. So you saw, hopefully, that there are meetings scheduled at all of our schools in the months of January and February. So we'll be inviting community members to come to one of those presentations to learn all about the referendum, the reasons for it, and how it might affect them. We're still scheduling other community meetings outside of the schools, and we already have a number of them scheduled. But board, as you come up with other ideas of places that you think we should go or community groups that you think would like to hear from us, please do be in contact with me, and I can see if I can get those scheduled. In January, a mailer will be coming home for all of to everyone in the community. So similar to what went home, what was mailed home, I believe in October, probably was in October. So similar but different, right? New information, and so that'll be coming in January. We're still updating our video, so that should be updated soon. We have poster boards that are being created that will be in all of our school offices for community members and parents to view when they come into our buildings. Those will be able to be brought out of the offices for evening events so that people can see them. And then also back to that newsletter, we highlighted in there that we have the tax calculator on our website right now. We've been hearing about it, and I'd love just to show you what it looks like. So Brandon, if you can show it. Yep, thank you. So let's scroll a little bit. Here we go. So this is what the tax calculator looks like. We're not going to do a dry run, but anybody can click in to get more information and enter in their fair market value of a home and answer some questions, and they'll be able to see what the potential annual, tax, what the change in tax would be due to a referendum. So we're really very happy to be able to provide that to the community so that they can really see what the impact would be on them. So, any questions at this time about the referendum update? Okay.
Okay, that moves us to new business for the evening. We've got a couple things to discuss. The first one is a discussion of the student registration fees, early childhood tuition, and facility rental fees for the upcoming school year, 24-25.
Okay, thank you. Annually, and as per board policy, the Board of Education approves fees for the upcoming school year. These are the registration and technology fees, student extracurricular fees, preschool tuition and transportation fees, that's getting the kids to school, and facility rental fees. So I'm going to go through each one of them and then go through the administration recommendation. There's more information in the board memo that I will reference, but I'm not going to go through all of it. So the first one is registration technology fees. These were last updated 5 years ago. They range from $100 for pre-K up to $265 for grades 7 through 8. There is a $25 early bird if you pay before a certain time. At this time, the administration is recommending no change for the fees for the upcoming school year of 24-25. Next, we have student extracurricular fees. We did spend a lot of time looking at these last year. Looking at various options that could be changed, which could be evaluated, which were investigated. The memo in the board packet has a list of those options that we did investigate. And it was done over a finance committee. We brought them back in December, we brought it back in January, and then we took a purposeful pause to gather more data, and then we brought it back in May and June, and then we made a decision. So as of this time, based on that work, we are not making a recommendation for a change in the fees for the upcoming school year. Whoa.
Well, what if a person really can't afford it though? Like, I've known people that don't have a lot of money to like spend on nice things. So how much will they be able to pay for tuition?
So there's a couple of different fees we're discussing today. So the first one was that I talked about was the register. Are we talking specifically for
Are
student?
you asking about the activity fees specifically?
Right, because
Let's talk, that's what you wanted to know about, like
Okay.
after-school activities? Yes, let's focus on that one. So perhaps what might be helpful right now is just to talk a little bit about what kinds of things that the board talked about in the past, but, and maybe first you can answer how we handle when students can't afford the fee. Let's start with
Absolutely.
that.
So
Yeah.
right now we're talking about basketball, soccer, volleyball, which have a range of fees between 175, musicals 120. So all those are listed in the memo. Some of the things that we discussed and we kind of did an evaluation to find out what we are truly doing as a school district to handle these is that, first of all, we do have a national school lunch program application. So students, which parents make the application on behalf of their student, and then they qualify for free and reduced if they don't have the correct income guidelines.
So I'm going to slow down.
Yes.
slow that down for a second. Okay, so I'm sorry, Mr. Wildman.
Yes.
So what families can do if they can't afford certain things is they can apply, and Mr. Wildman was talking about the National School Lunch, which makes no sense to be talking about when you're talking about activities, except it's linked a little bit because that's when people fill out that form, that's how we know that there is a financial hardship. That's the point of that. And so if families have that amount of hardship, which means they can't afford things, right, then what happens, Mr. Wildman?
Automatically, the fees are waived.
For all activities?
For registration and
But we're just
technology.
talking about activities.
One would be waived
Yeah.
if per family, which, let me exactly read it, what it is. In addition to the process, there is a long-standing practice of extracurricular fees being waived at the building level for students that qualify for free or reduced meals under that income threshold. These are one sport or activity per qualifying student, and so at GMS, Frederick, and Park Campus, that's done at a building level. So it's just that the family reaches out directly to the principal, and then the fee is waived.
So just to review that again, when a family qualifies and doesn't have enough money, then one activity for each year that the child can do for free. Last year, and the year before that, and probably the year before that, and probably the year before that, the board talked about wanting to not have to charge families at all for activities, because I think we know that it's hard to pick one activity, right? And it's not the child's fault if the family can't afford those to pay for activities. And so the board talked a lot about being, would it be possible to just say, you know what, we're just not going to charge for activities anymore. So the board did that. I would be happy to explain, kind of review that conversation unless somebody on the board wants to do it. Okay, looking at me. Okay, I'm happy to do it. So the board talked about it a lot because I think the whole board wanted to be able to do that. Where things were left was that unfortunately the school district is not in a financial position to be able to do that, to be able to say, you know what, we're just not going to charge anybody for any of those extra activities, because all of those activities cost money in one way or another. So if it's basketball, we're paying for a whole bunch of coaches, we're paying for buses, any of those kinds of things. You have, the musical, think about all of those people involved, the costumes, all of that kind of stuff, it all costs a lot. And the school district simply can't at this time afford to pay for everything for all students. And that's why it's been limited so far to one activity per child if the family can't afford it. But I do know, having had conversations with the board, that you all wish it were not that way and would like in the future for it not to be that way, correct? Yeah. So, Morgan, you asked one question and then a whole bunch of adults just blasted information at you. Do you want to ask another question, or do you want to ask a question about what we've just shared, or provide thoughts? Because it doesn't have to just be a question. You're welcome to just give us your thoughts, because I think the board wants to hear them as well.
Okay. So, what about tuition, though? How does that get affected?
So, school fees?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is what actually Mr. Wildman started with. So the families that can't qualify, again, like fill out this form and don't have enough money to pay those fees, they're free. So it's the word tuition is kind of a weird word because it's not really tuition, it's just fees that cover books and Chromebooks and all that kind of stuff. And families that can't afford it don't have to pay it. Do you want to add anything to that, Mr. Wellman?
They not only do we have that threshold that they can't afford to pay, but if they are even above that threshold, we have a hardship waiver process. So they fill in an extra form and they just check a box and it gets sent to me and I look at it and I either approve it or not. And it's usually something as per board policy, which is saying outside of the current income guidelines, there's something else going on with that family. And the vast majority of them I approve. And I think I've actually got that in the memo. How many I actually
Morgan
approved?
didn't read the memo.
Sure, what did I do?
I don't think she had it ahead of time.
It's not very exciting reading.
That wasn't,
very well
Morgan,
written.
that was not a
Very well
criticism.
written,
I just
wasn't
mean,
it?
I don't think you
know.
read the memo.
I don't remember this, so it's all good.
Yeah.
It's in the second paragraph. In the school year 22-23, 5 families requested and received waivers for registration and technology fees. And the administration received 4 hardship waivers and approved 2 this year.
Yeah.
So 7, and I've approved.
And that's actually not required by the state, correct?
That's
That
required. That's required by board policy.
But the hardship waivers?
Yes.
Okay, but not necessarily by the state of Illinois. Okay, that's okay.
I'm not sure your question.
All right, we don't have to go there.
Okay.
That's okay. Okay.
So what was I? I was back to extracurricular fees. So the administration is recommending no change for the upcoming school year based on the 5 options which were evaluated and represented back in June. The next one we have is preschool tuition. That is a tuition fee. And transportation, and that's for students who are 3 to 5 in our early childhood program. So we actually have two types of student, 2 kind of ways to get into that program. If you qualify for the Preschool for All program, which is if you're screened by Dr. Lorenzo's team, you actually can join the program for free. If you don't qualify for that screening, you can apply for what's called tuition-based, and you pay $250 a week and $52 extra for transportation. Okay? You know that. Okay, cool. That's awesome. And the administration is recommending no change in fees for the upcoming school year. And then finally, we have facility fees. Facility fees are when outside organizations and groups, according to our board policy, use our facilities. As the board is very aware, we do have 2 really quite successful intergovernmental agreements already. One with Round Lake Park District, allowing them to use Park Campus. And we entered into one several years ago with Grays Lake Park District, who utilizes our remaining buildings. They actually don't charge anything, but what that has allowed us to do is to really focus on donations and strategic planning, because we're able to fund our gymnasiums, because we can go outside of the regular billing and ask them for money outside of that. And as of today, the administration is recommending no change in the fees for the upcoming school year for what we charge for outside organizations.
Mrs. Miller?
Morgan, I just want to say I love your heart. There's a lot of heat in that, and maybe I read you wrong, but it seems like you really want to protect people who maybe can't afford to do some of the things that have been meaningful to you and to many people at this table. So thank you for your heart. I also wanted to let you know that I think Dr. Glickman already shared this, but whenever we're making decisions about money, we have to think about what we want to do and what we can do, right? Which is always tricky. And we generated an idea. We added a button onto the registration page that allows people to make donations. And that button generated a small amount of money this time, $10, but it's there. So if there are other people who have that same heart that you have and they're willing to take on some of the, I'm not suggesting you personally pay for somebody's basketball, but we're always looking for ideas for that because I think there's a lot of really generous people in our community that want to help students. So if you can think of some way to get people to use that button or maybe a better idea, we're all ears because we're trying to figure that out too. So thank you.
Morgan, I think what really, sometimes we get into these conversations where we ask all these really long questions to try to get at the difficult answers or maybe some type of answer. But the one part of your question that is important to the voice that you bring to the table is what about, right? What about this? Or what about this family? Or what about this family? And what can we do for them? And I think in addition to, some of the things that have been mentioned already about budgeting and making decisions on what we want to do versus what we can do, and the donation budget, which are all parts of what these conversations have to be about. We also, I think this is an excellent opportunity for my colleagues to consider. We have another learning thing coming up in the new year about policy, and all of this connects to that policy that we were talking about a little bit earlier. Do we have enough information in our policy to really affect the change that Morgan wants for the district, right? And if we don't have that information, why don't we have that information? Then when we ask Morgan's question, what about this? And what do we do next to make that information available to us? So I think what I'm taking from that question and what I would like us to do when we meet for our policy workshop is to look at the policy around student fees and registration and see, what about what everybody else is doing around the nation or the world, wherever that might be, and what are they addressing to it. So thank you. Comments? Yep.
It's always been a sticking point for me how much Science Olympiad is, and I know we've talked that comes from the national program level. And so it occurred to me, is there a way that we could try to advocate with that national level program to say, hey, can you think about districts that don't have Science Olympiad during the day and a lot of students who maybe want to try it out can't even afford it because the fee is so high. And just wanted to throw that thought out there. And I wish Annalise were still here because I imagine she had some thoughts about that one.
I was just even thinking about, Morgan's questions got me thinking about what else? So how do we advertise the button? How do we help fund, PTOs are great at fundraising, and we have some great businesses in town that, the Roost and Culver's and the Vine, so is there an opportunity to, create some funding for some, relief for some of this as well to kind of having a fund to be able to use. So just another thought, maybe our PTOs might be interested in partnering with us as well.
Okay, the next item, discussion of Chromebook case replacement fees.
Sorry. So as you know, last year, can you hear me? How about now? Yes. Okay. As you know, last year you guys had a discussion about starting to assess fees to students for the damages to devices and Chromebooks. And so we started doing that last winter. And at the same time, we also purchased cases to help protect those devices and keep them around for as long as possible. This is proposing to create a charge for students who intentionally damage their cases, because it's really hard to protect them if the case is damaged. So is that?
I'm just going to add in that we indeed are seeing that intentional damage. So this isn't a, what if that happened? I was walking through a classroom yesterday and thinking, oh, look at that. Oh, and it was clearly intentional damage, just picking at things, so to speak. So, so can you just share what the replacement fee would be, Amanda, when you have a new mic?
Really close to you, Sue.
Thank you.
So we would ask for a direct cost. So what we are being charged, we would just pass that charge along to families, which is $28.
And board, the reason we're bringing this to you as a discussion item and then ultimately as a vote in the future is that the other charges that Amanda is referring to are charges you've already talked about and are actually already in the student handbook. This would be new. And so since it's a charge to families, we wanted to make sure that you as a board were comfortable with that decision and supportive of us moving forward. We wanted to see if you had any questions.
I just am thinking, this is just a knee-jerk reaction, but in terms of intentional damage, what kind of intentional damage? And the reason I'm asking is it indicative of students who are fidgety and having a hard time? And then is that an additional, I don't know, hardship for families that's not financial, but maybe might be more psychological? So that's just, I'm not saying we shouldn't adopt the fee, I'm just wondering, are you noticing patterns about what kind of damage?
So that's a great question. There is some fidgeting, picking at things that is happening, and what you're saying is maybe like an accommodation for someone who has that nervous energy or something like that. The specific incident that prompted this discussion was someone cut. I don't know if you are familiar with our Chromebook cases, but there's like some cloth that holds together the hard plastic shell on either side, and someone cut it in half. So that is intentional damage.
In addition, I mean, I'm the one who mentioned picking just because of a classroom I was in where you could see there were just a few students where there was just something almost picked away. I think what we're seeing is that many of our students are considering the Chromebook cases to be their own, right? That they think that they belong to them, and they don't. They belong to the school district. And so we're interested in making sure we send that message appropriately, but also from a pure financial point of view, we're recognizing that when we send a Chromebook along to another student, we are now going to have to replace the actual case, and we don't want the school district to have to take on the cost of that.
Yes, and the cases are intended to last for the lifetime of the device, so you have to really work to create some of the damage because they've had those cases for less than a year. So just wanted to share that as well.
Any other questions? Okay, so we'll bring this back for a vote at the next board meeting. Great.
Okay, reunification agreement with Round Lake Beach is next on the list.
Okay, I'll take that.
Mr. Wellman, yep.
Okay, we've been working with the Village of Round Lake Beach to secure a reunification site that can serve CCSD 46 staff and students during an emergency evacuation situation. The Village of Round Lake Beach requested that we create a reunification agreement to memorialize this and their legal responsibilities, holding them harmless for indemnification in case it's needed. The agreement as presented has been reviewed by the District Legal Counsel and Korea Bocek. and the draft agreement was presented to the Round Lake Beach Committee of the Whole on December 11th. I'm glad to tell you that it actually passed. No changes were requested or made, and so it will be presented to the village board on December 18th for approval. So what you're seeing is the draft that was actually is making its way through Round Lake Beach. Any questions?
Alrighty. Moving on to the last item on our new business list is the discussion of an IASB delegate for next year. What are we discussing? Who wants to do it?
I think I remember where this came from, because it was when Mrs. Nash and I were preparing, and we talked about how we were running, it was a little bit close to the conference that we had our discussion, and if there had been more resolutions to discuss, or if we had wanted to discuss things further, we wouldn't have really had the chance. And then there was another piece to it.
I think it was just the timing if we
timing.
wanted to propose a resolution.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, and then you move it earlier in
That
the
deadline,
year.
I think, is in June, so we just wanted to have somebody in place to be thinking about it earlier.
That's right.
I think it's also a process, because I think you've established one where there's someone who is a delegate, someone who's shadowing with the intention of being the delegate next year, and we kind of get in a rotation.
Were you the shadow last year?
So,
because I think what Mrs. Miller is saying that, I think we might have a delegate.
Sitting to our right. Okay.
Yeah, I think the plan was for me to shadow and then be the delegate next year, or yeah. And
So we need a shadow for next year.
Yeah. And Mrs. Nash created a process document, and it's really great. So I'm like, I guess it's getting later because
So we should decide on a shadow. I've never done it before, but I think you and I are the only ones that haven't done it. Is that correct? Am I? Is that legal? We'll do it. There you go. We'll have to talk about that, I think, yeah, because there's a couple things that I haven't thought about, but yeah.
I'm happy to jump in. If
Yeah,
you want to just make
that's
it
fine.
easy.
That's fine.
I'll shadow you next year.
And then it sounds like what we have is a rotation too, potentially. So then logically, then I would probably do it afterwards. So we all have an opportunity to do it, and then start back at the beginning again.
So in that case, maybe you should shadow, because are you not up?
That's true.
When are you up for reelection?
That's true. 25.
Yeah.
So I can shadow. I think it would be fascinating. So that's fine.
It's a really cool
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Definitely everyone should do it at least once.
All right, I'll shadow. Yeah. Well, it worked. All right. Topics for future agenda items.
All right, I can share what we have scheduled. January 17th, 2024, get used to saying it, 2024. We will be having, so speaking of Twig Science, which you heard our students talk about, we will be having a presentation about Twig Science. Jenny Ursler, one of our 8th grade science teachers, is going to be coming with some students from GMS to talk about a unit they did on knowledge of forces. We're pretty excited about that. Amy Gluck will also do a presentation on standardized assessment. And we have 2 action items that are that came out of tonight's meeting. So that reunification agreement will bring you, and then the Chromebook case replacement for action. And then I actually think, I know I sent an email to board members about this today with a reminder about it, but I actually think we talked about it at the board table last time. We talked a little bit about that social media lawsuit, and I think I asked you at the table, do you want to discuss that at the board? And I think you said, yes, you do. And then I think I said, great, we'll do that on January 17th. So does that sound familiar to what happened? Okay, so we'll have that conversation on January 17th at the board to kind of discuss the implications of that lawsuit, that class action lawsuit, and whether you as a board want our school district to be involved in that lawsuit, to choose to jump on. Okay. Anything else for January 17th? Cabinet, did I miss anything? Okay. February 7th, we start with a policy committee meeting. Board, you should all already have the policy worksheet, so you should already know what policies we'll be discussing. We will have Park Campus Leader of the Pack that night, so we'll have students back here from Park on February 7th, and then the student fees action item. February 21st, the only item I have at the moment is that Dr. Diaz will do a presentation about refugees, in support of refugees. And I'm quite certain between now and February 21st, something else is going to come up. Oh, and I'm getting the news.
We'd like to give you an update on the 3-year capital.
Got it. Yep. Okay. And then March 6th, we're going to have our GMS student reps coming back, as they talked with you about tonight. And we'll be doing a presentation about composting. Excuse me, that's after our Resource Conservation Committee has met, and they've discussed composting, and so we'll be bringing that here with more information. And we are intending at that board meeting to bring you our final candidate for the Woodview principal position. As we know, Kathy Santelli is retiring, and we posted that position. And so we are intending to have a final approval for that candidate on March 6th. And I've got plenty more, but who needs that? That's enough for now. March 6th. Anything else anybody wants added at this time? Okay. Yep. Oh, Jess.
I was thinking about the parent, Liz Wixer, who came in a couple times last year and this year to talk about the bike, walk, and roll day. And I was reminded of our policy, 660. There's the last one talks about in kindergarten through 8th grade, education must be available to students concerning effective methods of preventing and avoiding traffic injuries related to walking and biking. And I just wondered if we wanted to think about encouraging a bike, walk, and roll day, given that parent input, not to add more work, but to just put the invitation out there and communicate about it. And maybe neighborhoods and different schools could do their own thing, but just know that it's out there and the school district supports that.
It might be a good time to start thinking about Earth Day in February too, and doing some district-wide initiative.
And we do have activities that occur around that time for sure. So what we can do, I mean, it can be board discussion. I'm not sure that that's what you're asking for necessarily. I think that's just the board asking, are these things that we'll do as a school district? And we were working with a parent last year about the bike, walk, and roll day. At one of the schools was, and then we didn't move forward at that time. So I think there can be some more conversation at the administrative level about being able to bring that to our community. And we can do that through a newsletter and all that kind of stuff, certainly.
One more that actually you all might have brought up at Equity too is just identifying opportunities for making MLK Day a day of service.
Yeah. So yes.
I think a request for to communicate opportunities so that we can communicate them.
Right. That was the request, because I have been going on community websites looking for opportunities for community members to be involved in that day of service, and so far have come up with nothing. So it's kind of my hope that our community is kind of currently focused on the holidays, and that's what's being advertised, and then we'll start sharing information out. So we're going to keep our eyes on that.
I'm pouncing on this because Mrs. Nash and I have been, we've been working with a librarian at the Grays Lake Public Library. There's something in the works. It just, I don't have a lot of details right now.
Fantastic. Cool. Thank you.
Something that I meant to mention for Equity, and is that our newcomers, one of the things I learned at Triple I is that our newcomers typically, and this is what I heard, I don't know if this is true, this is what the presenter said, is that our newcomers typically are coming from homogenous communities and may need differentiated help with equity because they may not know how to live in a heterogeneous population. So just that might be a unique need for our newcomers that might weave somehow into MLK Day or something like whatever we decided to do. But I meant to bring that up. So.
Do we have any public comment? No. Do we have a closed session? No. All right, I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved. I'll second.
Okay.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
and Braden.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.